What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Sports Nerds here on the 515 Podcast Network. I'm Brock Beirman alongside, as always, with Dawson Livingston with his great Chiefs hat on. I'm not going to lie, that's clean look.
Appreciate it.
But we're here to preview the NFC East, which is another division, really, when we're looking at the NFL and which divisions get talked the most. This one probably gets talked the most when it comes to just storylines and just drama in general every year, no matter what. And I think it's a lot because of one team located in Texas, but we'll get into that. But how we feeling, Dawson? I know you've been posting some of our reactions and previews on TikTok. We are now on TikTok at 515 Podcasts. We'll post those on Instagram as well. We are working on getting Twitter back so we can live stream on Twitter. But once we get back to that, we'll let you guys know. But we're live here on the 515 Podcast Network on YouTube and Facebook currently. But how are we feeling, Dawson?
Feeling good. Feeling good. We're getting so much closer to football season. College football we got this weekend. I know we don't got crazy games, but Florida State and Georgia Tech is at the top of my watch list. Is it Friday or Saturday?
I think it's Saturday.
Saturday but that's on top of my watch list this weekend. And then next weekend, that's when actual college football starts, which always is a lot of fun to watch, especially for you and I, as you're a Cyclone fan and I'm a Hawkeye fan. We're just getting that much closer to Cyhawk weekend.
I just got my roster list for the game next weekend for working the event. I'll be working the video board. So anybody at Jack Trice, if there's anything wrong, don't blame me. It's definitely not my fault. But yeah, I'm super excited. I can't wait. I know you got Georgia Tech and Florida State on your radar. I got midnight kickoff between Hawaii and Delaware State, if it even happens. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've
if they
seen the
make the
story.
bus, dude.
Like Delaware State's having to go commercial airlines. Hopefully they can make it before Saturday, which, I mean, they have the luxury of it being literally a midnight kick, basically, which is kind of crazy to think that a team that's located in Delaware on the East Coast is going to go play Hawaii at midnight Central Time, I think it is. It
Ooh.
does just that's brutal. Like Hawaii, I think is like favored by like 38, 39, and it's going to be unbelievable. I'm just watching it for the memes, honestly. It's going to be so funny. And I mean, Delaware State's logo is kind of clean. They got that like
Aren't they the Hornets?
yeah, they got that like it's like a bright red with a bright like Tar Heel looking blue, and I like the look for sure. But back to the NFL, we'll start previewing the NFC East here. I would say this division last year was a big disappointment, probably compared to what people expected some of these teams to do. I know you had one of them in the Super Bowl heading into the season with the Cowboys, who had a very, very disappointing appearance in the NFL playoffs last season. The Giants, struggled a little bit after getting Danny Dimes his contract. I mean, he got hurt as well. And then the Eagles didn't like struggle, but they had some moments where like they didn't look like the team that made the Super Bowl the previous year. So where you and I guess we should also mention the Commanders didn't have a good year. They moved on from Ron Rivera. I think as we get into this, you'll find out. I think it is a new era for the Washington franchise over there. What are your thoughts on the NFC East heading into this season? Any big things standing out to you? I know CeeDee Lamb is still waiting for a contract extension, and he reminds me a lot of Dez Bryant with how he's using social media to his advantage. And Dez Bryant was kind of ahead of his time for using social media for contract negotiations. But what are your thoughts on the NFC East heading into this season?
Yeah, like it was last year. I think there's two very good teams in that division with the Eagles and the Cowboys. I'm sure we'll get into it later. And then two teams that are, how do I put this nicely, rebuilding with the Giants and the Commanders. Giants, they thought they had their quarterback 2 years ago, and then they paid Daniel Jones, and then they're now regretting it. The Commanders got their quarterback, and Jaden Daniels has looked good in preseason, but preseason you can only take it with a grain of salt sometimes. So I think it's just two polar opposites for two sides of the division. I will say Cowboys and the Eagles are probably some of the better teams in the NFC, only maybe behind San Francisco and Detroit that I can think of off the top of my head. So I think those two will be battling out for the one seed in that division. So it should be fairly competitive towards the end of the year.
Yeah, and I was looking at both teams and their seasons last year. Dallas was 12-5. Eagles, Philadelphia, they were 11-6. The big thing that stood out to me was that the Cowboys went 8-0 at home, and that is a huge deal in terms of, I don't think there is such thing as a huge home field advantage in the NFL. It's not like college football whatsoever, but being able to defend your home field and get wins is huge, and going 8-0 is honestly quite impressive.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I think there's a stat out there. The last 2 years, the Cowboys average almost 35 points a game when they're at home in Jerry World. But when they go on the road, that's when they usually struggle. Um, Not the playoffs last year. They just got absolutely annihilated by the Packers.
Yeah, that was
Um,
that was an embarrassing appearance for sure.
yeah, couldn't tell you why that happened, or I don't know. That just kind of beat all the momentum they had for going at home. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if they're able to keep that good home record this season.
For sure. And I mean, let's dive right into it. I want to look at the Eagles a little bit first, more specifically, probably because they, made the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I think a lot of people were either choosing them or the 49ers to make the Super Bowl this past season as well. And I feel like they were a little bit disappointing compared to what people may have expected. And I'm kind of curious, do you think that's more on the fault of the fans who probably expected a little too much too quickly because they did have a good run to the Super Bowl? Or did the Eagles actually underperform?
Well, I think if you remember, they started off last year either 5-0 or 6-0, up, and they went undefeated up until they played the Jets. And then that second half of the season's when they really, I don't know what was going on. Their December was pretty rough. I don't have their schedule right in front of me from last year, but I remember them dropping some games. They lost a game to the Cardinals, I think, in December.
I
Um,
remember that.
I don't know if that was just a Super Bowl hangover or what it was, but they should be better this year. They got rid of both their coordinators last year. They got two new ones. They brought in, oh man, Kellen Moore as their OC, and I'm blanking on the defensive coordinator's name off the top of my head. But they should be good this year. They also brought in free agents like Saquon and guys like that. So they should be better this year, but they'll have to move on from obviously their star center from last year, Jason Kelsey, who I don't know who watches the offensive line in depthly, but Jason Kelsey is arguably the best center of all time, and he's really going to be missed for that Eagles offense.
I'm not dumb to assume that he's going to make the Hall of Fame at some point, right?
No, he's probably the greatest center of all time.
Yeah. I don't know how often offensive linemen get the nod to the Hall of Fame. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, he's, like you mentioned, the greatest center of all time. So I'm actually on the standpoint of, like, when he's eligible, he should probably get
First
the nod
ballot.
right away. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just the impact that he has had on the game as a whole, and the awareness that people now have on the offensive line, and like how big of an impact a center can have on a team's success. I mean, that just proves how big of a deal that he has been for that Eagles franchise. And unfortunately, he's not going to be there. I'm interested to see if that will affect their QB sneak looks, the tush push looks, or whatever. I know I didn't they adjust the rules, or they were looking at adjusting the rules. I think they ended
They
up not
didn't
doing
this
anything.
offseason. I think they might next offseason, but they didn't this offseason.
So we'll see what they do this year. It will help that they have Saquon Barkley in the back to help him push at this season. I think he is a great addition. Hopefully, they don't try to overuse him, because I do think he is he's getting up there to where you can't use him every play, because I feel like he's going to be injured prone at some point. The running backs, they hit that certain number of carries and then their career starts slowly, some quicker than others, starts going down in performance. And so I think he's a great addition. They also, I feel like, did a great job in the draft and getting DeJean. I mean, the fact that DeJean fell to the 40th pick is a steal, in my opinion, for Philadelphia. I don't know if he's been returning punts or if he's even been playing in the preseason as much. I haven't paid attention to the preseason, but he has the chance to be a great defender, as well as a Devin Hester-esque type of player where he's impacting the special teams. And so I think they made some good moves in the draft. got some great players off of free agency. So I don't have any reason to believe that they're going to go any lower than their current win total that was last season, 11-6.
Yeah, they certainly added a lot free agency. But what I loved the most about their offseason was they were able to address their like weakness, I would say, on their team. Their secondary. Their secondary was, I'll keep it nice. It was awful last year. I could have said something a lot harsher, but they were able to get guys like you said, Cooper DeJean, Quinyon Mitchell, who they selected in the first round at Toledo. They were able to get a guy that was on their team 2 years ago in C.J. Gardner Johnson back from the Lions, who was very vital for them in their Super Bowl run. So I think by shoring up that part of their defense, I think it's only going to make their front seven that much better because now the front seven will have time to get after the quarterback. And that front seven has guys like Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox retired, excuse me. Brandon Graham is who I meant to say. But they still got a lot of guys up front because they were paying that D-line a lot of money. So I think them only adding corners is only going to help the entire defense as a whole.
Last season, a lot of people were talking about them going back to the Super Bowl. This year, I feel like not enough people are talking about the Eagles, and that could be a great situation for Philadelphia because, I feel like Philadelphia, that whole city in sports takes pride on being the underdog. And if no one's really talking about them, I know the lines may say differently, but when you look at the media, nobody's really talking about them heading into the season, at least from what I've seen. And so I have a good feeling about them. I have their, ceiling at around 12-5 and their floor maybe one game less than what they had last year at 10-7. I feel like that's fair. I could see them going over 12 if for some reason they don't have that slump that they had last year. But I think 12-5 is probably where I see them finishing this season.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on to where what I have them. I really quick looked up Super Bowl odds. They're actually the fifth highest odds for the Super Bowl, only behind San Francisco, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Detroit. So like you said, I agree. I don't think enough people are talking about them making a run back to the Super Bowl because I think a lot of people are on the San Francisco and Kansas City train. But I do really like what Philadelphia did this offseason. I would say their ceiling is about 12-5, and I would say their floor is probably 9-8, and that's assuming like that's disaster scenario.
Yep.
I don't really see them going to that floor. I like you said, I think they're gonna finish around what they did last year, or they go to 12-5. But that's kind of where I have them this year.
Yeah, and I mean, if they have a repeat of last year, I definitely can see that 9-8 situation. And if that happens, I think a lot of things might like roster wise might change in the offseason, or they might make decisions on the future of their staff and everything because this team has the talent to compete for a Super Bowl championship. And I don't see a reason why they shouldn't be the favorite, honestly, because
Mm-hmm.
again, they were there 2 years ago. Last year, they just had a terrible slump, and it resulted in them not making a run to the Super Bowl eventually. So I feel more confident in them, let's say, than I do the other team in this division that's probably talked about for potential Super Bowl runs. And of course, we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, which I mean, on this graphic is kind of funny. You see CD Lamb if you're watching our stream on YouTube or Facebook. Cowboys went 12-5 last year, 5-1 versus the division, 8-0 at home. And right now, their star wide receiver is holding out and waiting for a contract extension. I don't think anything has been announced today as we're live here on I think is it Wednesday already?
It
Or is it
is.
it is Wednesday already. Good Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm fine with because that means we're one step closer to football and college football season this Saturday. But still holding out. They need him if they want to be successful. I was just rewatching some of the highlights from like the best college football playoff games and him in Oklahoma versus Georgia. If there was a Big 12 team that I think could have won the national championship ever in that original 14 playoff, it was that Oklahoma team with him, Hollywood Brown, Baker Mayfield. That whole team was just
Mark Andrews.
serious. Yeah, Mark Andrews.
Yeah.
That roster was just stacked on the offensive side. And I mean, they had a big lead against Georgia. I forgot about how like big of a lead they had, and then Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, and the Bulldogs decided to turn it up at the last moments of the game. But anyways, CeeDee Lamb without an extension right now, holding out. Jerry Jones is doing Jerry Jones things where he's just kind of making it a bigger deal than it actually is. Are you under the same boat as me that he's getting an extension before the season starts, right? Or am I crazy?
I don't know. I'd see. I've been thinking about this over the last week. I feel like a deal would have already happened by now. I feel like CD is just holding out just to hold out. I think he's just trying to squeeze every penny out of the Cowboys because I think he wants to get up to that just above the Justin Jefferson number, which wasn't Jefferson $35 million, or am I stupid saying that number?
Let me look real quick, but I think you're right.
So I think he's just because I know the Cowboys offered him $33 million a year, but I think he just wants to leapfrog Justin Jefferson because for a lot of these positions, it's like, yeah, it's next in line. It's like you got to do better than the guy before you. You got to make sure because you want to reset the market and make sure everyone else behind you gets to benefit from your bigger contract. So I think he's trying
worth it though.
I think he was arguably a top 5 receiver in the league last year. Now, whether that was a one-off of his career or if this is just a trend going forward is another story. Last year, I think he's certainly worth it. Obviously, Dak Prescott plays infinitely better when CeeDee Lamb is on the field. I mean, CeeDee Lamb, I think, almost had 190 or 200 targets last year. He gets a lot of action in the passing game for Dallas, so I think if he ends up holding out into week 1 or in beyond that point, I think it's really going to hurt their offense. I do think, though, he will agree to a contract at some point before the season, but it is a little concerning that we're on what, August 21st at the time of this recording, and there is no deal whatsoever.
I mean, you can just feed Zeke instead, He's back on the roster.
I guess.
After losing, Tony Pollard to the Titans, which, by the way, didn't they lose DeMarco Murray to the Titans as well? Like, they had this...
No, Murray went to the Eagles and then went to the Titans, I think.
Oh, okay. Because
I'm fairly confident.
I was like, am I watching a rerun? I swear that they just lost a running back like 10 years ago. Oh my gosh, 10 years ago. Doesn't seem that long ago, but still, DeMarco Murray. So he did go to the Eagles, right? Before?
Yeah. So he obviously was on Dallas the first 4 years of his career and then went to Philly for a year. That was like Chip Kelly and that whole Eagles era where they traded LaShawn McCoy for Kiko Alonso to the Bills for nothing. And then, he went to Tennessee for 2 years.
But back on the Cowboys, for key losses, I did put Tony Pollard down because I do think he's kind of a worse version of Christian McCaffrey, but he's able to do Christian McCaffrey things where he's not just a running back. But another one I put was Dan Quinn. I do think Dan Quinn is a huge part of the success that the Cowboys defense has had over the years. I do think the Cowboys defense roster is still decent. I think some of them actually ended up flipping to Washington once Dan Quinn got hired as the head coach there. But he's going to be a huge part of the Commanders, who I think will make a big stride this season. And I think potentially he's a big reason why the Cowboys may take a step back this season.
Right, and a guy we haven't even mentioned that left the Cowboys in the offseason is Tyron Smith, who's arguably been one of the better left tackles in all of football the last, 10 years? Him going to the Jets is really going to hurt this offensive line because now you still have Zach Martin, but man, the rest of that offensive line, you got Tyler Smith, who's a third-year player or second-year player, who's still obviously developing as a young guy, and I couldn't even tell you the rest of their offensive line. When I was a kid, like 10 years ago when I was in elementary school, middle school, the Dallas Cowboys had the most insane offensive line from what I remember. They had Tyron Smith, Zach Martin, and Travis Frederick. If you're that far back, like the Cowboys had that insane of an offensive line, which is why Zeke had so many yards his rookie year. That's why DeMarco Murray was a Pro Bowler with the Cowboys. Like, them not having an offensive line is really going to hurt their identity, and it's only going to put more pressure on guys like Dak Prescott and the guy that's on the schedule right now in CeeDee Lamb.
And no conference championship appearances.
Right. Not since either one of us have been born.
Yeah, which is just crazy, honestly.
The New York Jets have made a conference title since the time the Cowboys have.
Oh Lord.
With Mark Sanchez. And I'm not hating on Mark Sanchez, but I'm just saying, I'm just putting it out there.
No, but I don't think they're going to have a terrible season. I see them around 10, 11 wins, maybe 12 if they actually do make strides this season. I do think the loss of Dan Quinn as the DC is going to hurt a little bit. If for some reason things fall off, this will be the last season of Dak Prescott as quarterback for the Cowboys. I will go out on a limb and say that. Like if they finish 8-9, that's where I have their floor as, just as a like hypothetical, similar to what you did with the Eagles, like, oh crap, this isn't actually a good roster anymore. But 11-6 is probably where I see them finishing, and around 8-9 for the floor.
Man, me and you are on the same page today. Like that's honestly what I have to a T. I might move their ceiling up to 12-5, and this is like CeeDee Lamb signs today or tomorrow. Dak Prescott wins the MVP, just like crazy one-off scenario. I do think they're going to finish with the record about 10-7. I think we'll be in December and there'll be talks about Dallas competing for the division title, but I think Philly's going to walk away with that.
I agree. And I mean, when's the last time an NFC East team has won back-to-back years?
2004. Like 04?
Yeah. 2004, and it was the Eagles. The Cowboys are the reigning NFC champs. So the Cowboys have a chance to break that streak, but if history repeats itself, it's probably going to be the Eagles or someone else. And so we'll see what Dallas does. I mean, I'm one of the few, I think, that doesn't hate Dak. I think he's good. Does he make some mistakes? Yeah, but I think the fact that he has the star on his helmet puts a bigger target on his back than probably most quarterbacks. And so we'll see what happens. But I do think if they finish 8-9, I think something will happen in the quarterback room potentially this offseason. But that's a hypothetical if everything falls off. And I don't think that's going to happen this season.
Right. And Dak is going to most likely hit the open market next year and command upwards of, 60 mil? 65 mil?
Depending on how the season goes, for sure.
Right. But even if he gets that contract from Dallas or whatever team, like I think he's able to walk into almost any team that doesn't have a quarterback and be like, hey, I am night and day difference of what you currently have in your quarterback room. I deserve $60+ million a year.
And somebody will take the bite on that.
Raiders. I said that in the AFC West episode, and I'm honestly still sticking to it.
Might as well. Speak it into existence so we can get Dak Prescott versus Pat Mahomes twice a year. Just make that, AFC West that much tougher with the quarterback situations. But, yeah, we both see a decent season for the Cowboys. Double-digit wins is probably where we both see them going. Next team I wanted to talk about, and this is because I think they're going to be better this season. I think they're also going to be better than the Giants, is the Washington Commanders. They hired Dan Quinn as the head coach, brought on Cliff Kingsbury as I think he's just a quarterback coach, if I remember correctly. He might be the OC. I think he's just the quarterback coach, though. And drafted Jaden McDaniels with the second pick. McDaniels. I don't know why I called him McDaniels. Jaden Daniels. Him and Cliff Kingsbury together, I think, could be a huge deal for this Commanders team. And you add Eckler coming from the Chargers, as well as, they still have Terry and others on the offensive side. I really like this Washington offense, which is a good thing because Dan Quinn's a defensive guy. So if he needs to worry about the defense, the offense, they don't need to worry as much. Am I crazy to think that the Commanders might have a decent season this year?
Yeah, it all depends on the shoulders of Jaden Daniels. Like, if he's, I think he's already been named the Week 1 starter.
Yep.
No, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, I really like what they did in the offseason. They had a top 5 amount of cap space, and boy, did they use it. I have all their additions to my screen, but it's like they took guys off the Cowboys and like Dorrance Armstrong and Tyler Biadasz. I know they were able to, like you said, get Austin Eckler. They were able to get Christian McCaffrey's brother, Luke McCaffrey. First round, they went Johnny Newton, who's going to be good for him. They were able to get another corner from Michigan and Mike Sandstro.
I think
And
Zach
then,
Ertz is a great addition as well.
right. And then, kind of the veteran of this defense, I think, is going to be Bobby Wagner, who I think a lot of people, I don't think Bobby's nearly the same player he was 4 or 5 years ago, but I think he's going to be great in that locker room. It's really going to help those young guys. And they didn't really lose a whole lot from their last year team. I mean, they lost Kendall Fuller to Miami, which he's a good corner for him, good corner safety. They traded Sam Howell to Seattle, so they were able to get some draft picks out of him after seeing what did he lead the league in picks last year. So they kind of realized, hey, we don't think this is our guy. And they lost Curtis Samuel to Buffalo, but they still have guys like Terry McLaurin. I almost said Terry Rozier.
Terry.
Scary Terry. Terry McLaurin. They have Diami Brown. They still have Jahan Dotson, and they have Zach Ertz, who they were just signed. So I really like what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball this year.
And I feel like that's a great thing. Like, if I'm a head coach, I would want my most stacked area to be the area that I'm not necessarily known for. And Dan Quinn's known for the defense, so he can scheme and work with the defense more than having to worry about the offense. Of course, you still want to work with the offense, especially when you got Daniels coming in his first season as quarterback. But you got Kingsbury. I know I can't remember the offensive coordinator that they ended up hiring, but they have a good offensive staff. And so
I think Kingsbury is the OC.
so he is.
I think so.
Okay.
That's what I just looked up.
Then credit to them because I thought he was just a quarterback guy, which is even better that he's the offensive coordinator. So shout out Cliff Kingsbury. Somehow got fired by Texas Tech, got a better job to be the head coach in Arizona. One of the few times you can fail up in the NFL, and so
when your failure happens to produce Patrick Mahomes in the NFL, it's like, oh, you're good with quarterbacks. You know how to score a lot of points. We want you in the NFL.
they should have saw that as a sign just to sign him as an OC though. And so
No.
I think this is a great position for him. He is meant to be an OC. And if I remember right, he was the OC at Texas A&M when a certain quarterback was there. And the rest is history when it comes to that season with the Aggies and Johnny Manziel. And if you can get a guy that watches no film to win a Heisman, I think that's pretty impressive to say the least. But I really like this team. I actually have them hypothetically as a ceiling, winning 10 games, potentially being the surprise team of the season. I also could see them winning 6 games. So that's kind of, it's Washington. It's been a while since Washington has been a team that people have been afraid of to play. And so we'll see what happens. I know that their season starts with 3 of the first 4 games on the road. One of the home game is against the Giants, so that's a great thing to have as a season opener. But at Tampa Bay could be a struggle to start. At Cincinnati's a team that is competing for Super Bowls, and then at Arizona, Arizona I think barely lost to Washington last season. So it could be a rough start, but I do think this team could potentially win 9 games.
Yeah, I think your ceiling in 4 just a little bit different than mine. I would say their ceiling is like 8 wins, just because I think it's tough for rookie quarterbacks to succeed like right away when they first enter the league. And I would say their 4 is about 5 wins. And that's if just like, hey, Jaden Daniels is just not ready this year. Like he needs a year to sit behind Marcus Mariota and just learn the offense that Cliff Kingsbury is going to install. But like you said, I think all Commanders fans should have a lot of optimism for not only this year, but the next few years because they really are built for success going forward.
Yeah. Now, I guess the final team, This might be a
The
quicker
best team of them
episode.
all.
The best team
Yes.
of them all in the NFC Least, as it used to be called in the early 2010s when they were all completely trash. The New York Giants. Did you happen to see any highlights or watch? I did watch one preseason game last weekend, and it was because it was the only thing on TV. The Giants versus the Texans game.
No, but I heard about Daniel Jones's day. That's all. That's all I. That's all I needed to see.
I watched it, and dude, some of the passes he was making. One was a pick six when he was going to get sacked, or he was trying to throw it away. He didn't. No, he wasn't trying to throw it away. He was trying to throw it to someone as he was getting tackled. And then some of the other throws, dude. I'm telling you, this might be a rough season for the Giants. And I mean, they went 6-11 last year. I don't have them winning even remotely 6 games this season.
I'm kind of on the same boat, and it sucks because I liked Brian Dable as a head coach, and if he goes like 4-13, he's gonna lose his job.
That's my ceiling for them.
It's 4-13.
I hate this roster, dude. I hate this roster.
Now, they made some addition. Let's talk about the good sides of what they did this offseason. They added Brian Burns, who's an absolute monster off the edge, who's really going to help their pass rush. They added Drew Lock from Denver, if you forgot about that already. They were able to get Malik Neighbors in the first round, who was electric at LSU.
Prayers for Malik Neighbors. He's not injured. He just has Daniel Jones as his quarterback.
Yeah. The amount of skits I've seen on TikTok that I've just been praying for Malik Neighbors is already in a concerning amount. But they're still able. They added a few pieces in the offseason. But like you said, when we touched on it earlier, they lost Saquon Barkley, which I don't even know who their starting running back's going to be right now. A loss we don't really talk about too much because he's a safety. They lost Xavier McKinney to Green Bay, who's now the highest paid safety in the league. Who it's only going to weaken that defense more, which is only going to hurt the team as a whole. So
you're making it sound like 4 wins sounds good.
So I would say their floor is 13-4. I'll say their ceiling is
13-4. 4-13.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like 13-4. Danny Dimes getting an MVP.
Oh man, yeah, 4-13. 4-13 is what I mean. No, if they go 13-4, dude, what happened in the NFL? That means Daniel Jones had 80 touchdowns.
If that happens,
probably 40
Dak Prescott
picks.
doesn't finish the season on the Dallas Cowboys roster.
No. I don't know why I said 13-4, but what I meant to say was 3-14 as their floor. I'll set the record straight, and I think their ceiling is either 5-12. I'll stick with 5-12. 5-12 is their ceiling.
I have a hypothetical situation where I see them going 2-6, 2 wins. So,
oh man, see, I have a tough time saying that with teams because I was dead set with that being Houston last year. Because going into the season,
as someone that
awful.
As someone that's a Cardinals fan and had their first pick, I thought I was rooting for that, and I realized early on that was not going to happen. I was like, we're going to get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison.
Yeah, last year, me and you both picked Houston to finish last in the AFC South. Like, unironically, both picked them to finish last. And they ended up winning a playoff game and playing the Ravens in the divisional round.
And now I like them even more than, like, most teams, honestly.
Now I like them to win the division this year.
So, God, we could have gotten Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison on the same team, man. That would have been electric. But, it's all right. We'll deal with Kyler and Marvin. We'll get off-brand Caleb Williams. Caleb, I'm seeing highlights. He's looking good. Fun size Caleb Williams. He's looking good.
Yeah, he is.
I got the Eagles winning NFC East. I mean, we'll do a podcast where we give our actual division picks, but you guys can probably tell that's who I'm leaning with. I do think that the Commanders could potentially be a future competitor in the NFC East and the NFC if this team is able to grow through Dan Campbell and the crew. But the Giants on the other end, no, they're trash.
Yeah, this division doesn't really have a whole lot to talk about. other than the
Which
two
is funny
teams up
because
top.
everybody talks about one team in this division 24/7, and they haven't done anything in our lifetime that is worth talking about.
Nope. The best Dallas team I've seen was the year it was Prescott and Zeke's rookie year when they lost to Rodgers on the last second field goal. That's the
I
best
thought they
Cowboys
were
team
going
I've
all the
seen.
way that year.
That team could have. That team was that good.
But
But
here we
Aaron
are.
Rodgers,
Yeah.
bad
Aaron
man.
Rodgers breaking the hearts of Cowboys fans. No,
Yeah.
Green Bay more specifically breaking the hearts of Cowboys fans years and years for generations and generations. But any final words on the NFC East before we sign off here?
Yeah, I think just to finish off this episode, I think I got the same thing. I got Eagles 1, Cowboys 2, Commanders 3, and Giants 4 in that order. We'll see. We'll see if this division's entertaining come November or December, but I don't really
I don't
see it
think
so
it
far.
will be. It might be entertaining come standings wise for that like final wild card spot, but I don't see it being a must watch division just because I don't. Not yet, at least. I could see it in the future as teams develop, like Washington. Man, I have hyped up Washington too much. If they suck this year, this is gonna not look good.
Same with me and the Panthers, bro.
You have unintentionally hyped up the Panthers, which is hilarious.
I'm gonna stay on the bandwagon, bro.
But yeah, that's it. That's all we have for this episode. A little shorter preview episode. I think it's because it's not as competitive of a division. We will actually have another episode, I think, posted either Friday morning or Sunday, previewing the AFC, the NFC
West
with the Cardinals, 49ers, and others. So for Dawson Livingston, I'm Brock Beirman, and we are the Sports Nerds here on the 515 Podcast Network. We'll be back here in a few days previewing the NFC West.